What we're looking at is a Red Cross quilt. We would also consider this a signature quilt or inscribed quilt. The Red Cross pattern came out in the Ladies' Home Journal magazine of 1917, and it was recommended as a way that you could help support the troops during the war. It's a fundraising piece. In other words, all of those individuals whose names are on the quilt probably paid a certain amount to add their name to the quilt, and then all the money that was raised went to the Red Cross organization to support the war efforts. The signatures in the very center there are the Dorcas Sunday School class, and those were likely the women in the organization that came up with the idea to make the quilt and then sold all of the opportunities to have your name added to it. The red and white technique is a style that we call red work, and it just means that it's a white background with red embroidery. We start seeing these fundraising quilts being made during the Civil War, and then they became a style of fundraising quilt typically done for churches. And so you would use the money to support a new pulpit for the church or building your church or something like that. And then they also were made for some of these specific efforts. This is an Amish quilt from the Jonathan Holstein collection. What makes this one really unusual are these large blocks of color, really rich, saturated color, where oftentimes the focus is the quilting rather than the piecing. This is an exception to that in a way with this Sunshine and Shadow or Trip Around the World patterning, where you see a lot of bright colors, and sometimes people are surprised by this. But when you get to know the Amish communities of Pennsylvania, you see that these are the kind of colors that they wear. They oftentimes cover them with capes or cloaks that would be darker and more somber in color, but these are not unusual colors to find in their communities. The heyday of the Amish quilts is 1920 to about 1950, though I think our earliest known Amish quilt is about 1869. We are really proud to have one of the most outstanding Amish collections in the world. This would be considered probably the classic Lancaster Amish quilt design, the center diamond, and I think that these are probably some of the most highly collected. People really saw them as very reflective of modern art, and they became something really popular for people to display in their apartments. They were quilted on frames, and this particular piece does have some what you'd consider classic Amish stitching, that swirling design in the outer border, then the small flower in the purple. All of those kind of designs are ones that we see in lots of Amish quilts. This is a 20th century quilt. What I love about this is the optical illusion that this quilt maker has created. It just gives you that incredible sense of creating a real depth in a piece that really is a one-dimensional surface. But I think the quilt maker was also really outstanding because she's not only used her different color of fabrics, but she's used a stripe throughout the circle that really emphasizes that feeling of movement in the quilt. It's rectangles pieced into that circle, long strips of them. If you can imagine, as you're working around that circle and getting closer and closer to closing it, if your pieces are not exactly right, if your skills aren't good, it's not going to come together perfectly like it did. So this is a quilter that's really exceptional with her skill. When you see a piece like this where somebody's considered every element of it, using the stripe, using that circular pattern, this was an artist at work. There's no doubt about it, and I love it for that reason. So what Nancy's doing now is very, very different from this. This was still really kind of an exploratory stage for her. Nancy travels to South America a lot, so I think you see a lot of that influence on these early pieces. It's one of the things that we like to do with the collection is to collect artists and follow them through their career. But she's probably one of the most influential quilt makers in the U.S. just because she does so much teaching and she's inspired so many other people to take up quilting and pursue their own style, find their own voice. This is one of Michael James's recent series, a series made as his wife went through the horrible process of early onset Alzheimer's. And Michael really, for a time, said he just couldn't quilt. He couldn't work. And then ultimately, he found that the work really kind of saved him. Some of the fabrics are done with photos that he's manipulating on the computer, some drawings. And to create this one, that's actually something that he's drawn on the computer, and then he can manipulate it by scale or size and then print it onto a fabric and create these unique prints. So he always has an ongoing process of developing the fabrics for these quilts. What Thomas Nauer is doing in Defense of Handmade is really making a statement. The barcode meaning something manufactured, mass-produced, but this quilt is really something that is unique and one of a kind. Modern quilters are taking somewhat traditional shapes and forms and transforming them into something that's very contemporary. We're seeing a lot more men getting involved in quilting. It's not something that is so completely tied as a woman's art anymore. This is one of our soldiers' quilts, a wool pieced quilt. This probably was mid-1800s and English. Some indication of the military connection with the insignias on the four corners and the crown in the center. But these still remain in large part a mystery to us. They were probably made at 3 different time periods, early on in India, in Prussia, in about the mid-1800s, and then also in the late 1800s in England as well. What's amazing about them is the incredible, intricate design.